for being here. Thank you everyone for joining. As Shreya mentioned, thank you for joining on a weekend. To be honest, like I don't know why you were joining on a weekend. I had no plans. That's why I'm joining. Otherwise, I would have not with my friends. But here we are. Let me quickly share my screen and then we can start with the session. Yeah. So today, first of all, let me just give you a brief overview of what we'll be doing today. I hope everyone can see my screen. Can you? Shreya, can you give me a thumbs up?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So today what we'll be doing is that we'll be taking a journey into how web animations came into the picture. How it started way back in 1987. Don't worry, it's not going to be a history lesson, but certainly it's something which would be exciting enough to figure out. And next we'll be talking about where we are heading next, right? So first of all, I think it becomes customary, although she has already done an amazing job, but it still becomes customary that I should introduce myself or talk about myself. I should tell you how self-obsessed of a person I am. I'm Ishan. I'm a final undergraduate, currently pursuing my bachelor's in computer science. And I'm working as an, actually, earlier when I used to give this session, I always used to say I'm working as an intern at HackerRank. But recently I joined as a full-time employee. So I'm now working as a software engineer at HackerRank. I'm an app developer and a web developer, and sometimes I do post some of my stuff on Dribble as well. I've been working with the web for almost 8 years now. 8 years, how you might guess, even Shreya was asking me this question right before we joined. Actually, there's a fun fact behind this. I had a crush on one of my classmates back in, at home. I didn't realize that. But I had a crush on one of my classmates back in seventh grade. And then I wanted to do something for her. And then I really Googled how to hack Facebook account. Whatever, something happened. And that's how I got into programming. But that's when I learned about web development. And that's pretty much about it. I just love building good stuff on the internet. Now, before diving into the actual topic, let's just try to understand why animations or micro interactions, right? These things are even important. So when I did a simple Google search about what are micro interactions and why they're important, this is what came up. I'm actually reading from the first search result itself, so you can check over there as well. Micro interactions are events which have one main task, a single purpose, and they're found all over your devices and within apps. And when I open this one particular, how do you define this particular task, right? How do you define the single purpose? Uh, to search for this, I came across this one interesting blog post by Vamsi, and this is how he puts it. Micro interactions, their purpose is to delight the user, to create a moment that is engaging enough, welcoming, and dare we say it, the most human aspect, the most important aspect, human. Now, of course, I did this thing as well. I asked my friend ChatGPT as well, hey, what are micro interactions? Just to see, just to, first of all, test ChatGPT to some extent. And secondly, just to realize, see whatever research that I've done, is it true or not? And it gave me a similar result. The focus being improve the user experience, make it more engaging, interactive, and intuitive to use. Now, I'm not sure how many of you still remember seeing this dial-up internet connection dialogue back in those days. I feel pretty old by even looking at it, but when I was in school, this is what we used to do to connect with the internet. I had this Nokia N72 phone, and you pair it up with the data cable, and then you do the stuff. But the key point is that earlier on, browsers were not really designed for animations other than scrolling. They were designed to be mere document viewers, kind of like your Kindle, right? They were mainly used for sharing research papers and stuff. And the first sort of animation that we ever had was in the form of GIFs, graphics interchange format. This was introduced back in 1987. And early on, it was mostly used by companies like Coca-Cola or someone else to rotate their logos in text and all that stuff. And now we use it for sharing memes and all that stuff. Now, back when browsers were still at war, right, there were not many cross-platform standards to point to. The web was young and experimentation was rife. You had Netscape Navigator, Internet Explorer was there, Safari was coming up, and everything was going on. But there was no standard over there. And developers wanted to be able to create interactive websites and games no matter what the cost. So what happened? They came up with this thing called Macromedia Flash. And if you're someone from early 2000s, you may remember websites like miniclip.com. Again, I feel super old now, but I used to play so many games over here. Miniclip offered a lot of Flash-based games. Now, while Flash was a great technology, it went against one core fundamental principle of the web, which was to be open and accessible. And to cut a long story short, Flash support has been deployed on all major browsers. And Adobe did put a patch to it back in 2020, I guess. Yeah. And I was just wandering through the Wayback Machine. It's a pretty cool thing, by the way, if you haven't heard of it. Archive.org/web. You can use that to look at a history of the web in particular. And I was just looking at a few of these websites, and I was surprised to see this is how most of the web pages used to look like. Look at Amazon, look at McDonald's with those literally whenever in HTML classes, like in introductory classes, your teachers might have taught you, hey, body BG color is equal to yellow. It literally looks like that. Instead of using a hex code, someone just wrote yellow, red, or something while creating these websites. Oh, and this is how Apple's website used to look like. This was way back then. And the first sort of language, dedicated language for something like animations was introduced back in 1998. It was called SMIL, Synchronized Multimedia Integration Language. I know it sounds a mouthful, but this was created mostly to animate SVGs, and it was created by the Standards Committee. Now, keep that in mind. Standards Committee. It will come back in. We'll come back to it later. Now, then for the next few years, this is how things remain. Things remain pretty stagnant up until 2009. In 2009, what happened? There was a twinkling in Steve Jobs' eye. And the Safari team, which was building the mobile browser version of Safari for iPhone, right? They were like, hey, we need to make the web look cool on small screens as well. And we need to add animations, but they couldn't use Flash because of memory constraints. So they came up with some specs for CSS animations and transitions. But since there was no standards process, this is why there are not a lot of similarities between SMIL and CSS animations and transitions. And Apple being Apple, they came up with these standards and they just put it out in the world. No standards, nothing at all. Of course, it's Apple. But in the meantime, on the other side of the spectrum, if folks in the Internet Explorer team, right, who were building an Explorer, they were trying to come up with these three different standards now. You have SMIL on one side, then you have CSS animations, and then you have CSS transitions. So how do you cope up with these? So there was a state of urgency and a need of standardization as well to some extent. To a couple of years, they came up with the specs for something called Web Animations API, which is comprised of basically SMIL, CSS animations, and transitions, everything under one single umbrella. And the Web Animations API, it's pretty interesting. It consists of two key things. One is timing and one is animation. We'll explore these concepts in detail, but just to give you a basic context, timing is like basically the when, and animation is basically what. So let me give you an example. Imagine that you have a boat or you have an image of a boat and you want to add a simple fade in animation. So you would define the state something like this, that hey, at 0 seconds, the opacity should be, or the transparency should be 20%. And after 8 seconds or any n number of seconds, the opacity should be 1%, or it should be 100%, or opacity should be 1, right? So basically you're defining the start state and the end state. Now our browsers, they are smart enough to calculate all of these other states in between. So the start, the initial one and the last one that you define, these are known as keyframes, and rest of the frames are basically frames. Now, these two frames that now I'll wait. So now what we can do is actually let me show you. I have a cool example. I can't wait to jump into the editor and show some stuff. Yeah, I hope you can see my CodePen screen. This is something I built a few days ago. It's nothing fancy, just a normal CSS cat. That's it. I hope everyone is familiar with HTML and CSS. Now, what we'll try to do is I want to make this cat blink its eyelids, basically. So for that, what we can do is we can write a CSS animation. How do we do this? Let's say I'll define keyframes first, keyframes, and then you can type the animation name. So let's say I'll write eyelid, or what should I call? Let's say blink. That's the animation name. Now, since this is a state animation, we'll dive more into that. We have to define that he at 0%, the height should be 0 pixels. Let's say or 0% as well. I can do that. And at 50%, let's say at the middle of the animation, the height should be 100%. I'm referring to the height of the eyelid, by the way. So each eyelid, it has a height 0, 100, and everything else. That 100% at the end of the animation, you can restore it back to 0%. Now the animation is there, but you can see our cat is not blinking its eyes. So what we're missing is we have to link this particular animation. For this, we can use the animation property, animation CSS property, use the animation name. Then you can define the duration of the animation, let's say 2 seconds. And then you can define something called iteration count, which is the number of times this animation should execute. So if things go well, okay, things went well, our cat is now blinking. This doesn't not usually go well with demoing, but okay, now our cat is blinking its eyes. Now, whatever we just wrote, right, these were CSS animations. Since practically, if you notice one thing, we were writing everything in this CSS block only. I wrote nothing over here. I did not add anything intentionally. So if you notice one more thing, even closely, which is that these always had a start and end state. I defined here what it should look like at 0%, at 50%, and at 100%, and then everything in between. For this particular reason, these are also called as state animations. But what if we want to take this even further? What if we want to make our cat interactive, or let's say stateless animations? Let's say I want to animate my cat whenever I click on it, or whenever I hover on my mouse, or some other event. What do you think? What do you think we can do? Can you think of something? Is chat open? Can you write things in chat?
Yes, they can. Yeah.
Okay. So anyone has any clue? Let's see. You have 10 seconds. We just created a CSS animation for a cat. How can we trigger it with an event? Basically, you can use pseudo elements. That could be one approach, but again, how would you trigger it? If you're referring to the checkbox trick, then that would work. Yeah, but yeah, Harjinder mentioned JavaScript. Yeah, hover as well you can do. Actually, yeah, but I want to trigger it specifically on click. But yeah, for hover it will work. Makes sense. Yeah, but great job. Who said JavaScript? Actually, let's see. It was Harjinder. Perfect. So yeah, and let me give you a hint, right? For those who were not able to come up with this. So when I said this, I mentioned one particular word, one particular keyword, which was that I want to trigger it on a click event. So the moment you say event, the first thing that comes to your mind is, hey, event. So does that mean event listeners? Does that mean JavaScript? But whatever we wrote, right, it was in CSS. So how do you can you do something like CSS plus JavaScript? Actually, you can. That is exactly what the web animations API is about. Now, let me give you another example. So I have the same thing over here, but there is no CSS now for this animation. I will try to recreate this entire animation using JavaScript. So what we can do is, I just have two JavaScript selectors over here, query selectors. I'll define the keyframes like this in a variable. Const keyframes is equal to this. 1 second. Please speak in Hindi. I'm not sure. Is the target audience, are they comfortable with Hindi? Is everyone comfortable with Hindi?
We usually do this in English, so I mean, I'm not really
Okay,
sure.
then I'm sorry, Asha. She's getting a DM from someone asking to say in Hindi. It's okay. We can we can connect later in case you want. But anyways, so I'll just define the keyframes over here, just like similar to what we did earlier, right? You can see I'm just declaring an array over here. Keyframes and then height. At 0%, the height should be 0%, and then at 50% should be 100%. And then at the end, we can restore the height back to 0%. So I just defined the keyframes. It's a different way to actually declare the same thing. Now, what I can do is I can add an event listener. But before that, let's see if it's even animating. So let's say eyelid dot animate. So eyelids is an array. So I'll just get the first one and I'll try to call this animate method. I'm just trying to see if this works or not. And now this accepts keyframes and then it accepts something called options. In options, I can just pass, hey, this duration is, let's say 2000. 2000 is 2000 milliseconds. If this works, then our cat should wink at us, which is a bit weird, but that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. Now, what we can do is we can add an event listener on this. So let's say face.add event listener. Click. It accepts a callback. And in this callback, we can add this. But this time, instead of just doing this for one single eyelid, we can do this for each eyelid. So eyelid dot for each eyelid. Then it accepts another callback, eyelid dot animate. I think I'm missing a bracket over here. Let's see. Let's try clicking on a movement of truth. Yeah, now a cat is blinking. So what? So basically, let's see. Let me move back to the presentation. This is the transcript of what we just wrote, right? If you notice closely, what we are doing is we're doing nothing. Basically, we are just declaring this these keyframes in this array, and then we are just calling this animate method. And this animate method, it accepts two key parameters. One is keyframes, and the second one is options. Now, under the hood, what is happening? What this API is doing is it's calling this animation constructor and then passing down all of the keyframes and options and various other parameters that we shared over there. This is where things get interesting. By the way, we'll come back to this animation constructor thing. It is super interesting. Keep this in mind. The animation constructor opens up a lot of possibilities for us. We can leverage this to play with different animation states. You can pause, play, reverse, finish, and cancel. That is cool, but you can do this at any particular instance of time. And actually, this is an exact extract from the web animations API spec. It says that time will be shifted backwards and forwards, scaled, reversed, paused, and repeated. I know. You might be like, hey, son, what's the big deal? It's just an API, right? You just call this fancy .animate method and it accomplishes the same job. Now, to answer that, I want to ask how many of you are Marvel fans over here? Raise your hands in the chat or I can just write over there. How many of you are Marvel fans? Please, I hope there are some Marvel fans over here. I'm a crazy one, otherwise otherwise I'm going to convert. I'll try my best. I hope I don't get converted to a DC fan. Okay. Oh, Shaktiman, man. Okay. Cool. Good for you. Shaktiman, Iron Man, anything. I am a Marvel fan. I'm a big fan. And recently, not recently actually, this was months back, I was watching this one show called Moon Knight. And this is when one of my designer friends, she reached out to me and she asked me that, hey, I just saw this particular scene in the series. Do you think it would be possible to build something like this in the web? And as a CSS guy and someone has been working with the web for 8 years at this point, right? I can't say no. I was like, yeah, sure, anything is possible. Although I had no clue how to do this. And that's when Web Animations API came to the rescue. So I'll show you this one thing that I created. This is a simple website. I can share the link in the chat as well in case you want to play around with this. But the point is that if you come here, if you click on console, which is one of the characters, again, if I'm not forced Moon Knight, please go and watch it. It's a good show. The moment I click on it, the sky spins and basically tries to recreate that same effect. Now, here's another cool web page I came across a few years ago that changed my life. This was this macOS Big Sur page. It is not there live right now, so I just opened Red Wayback Machine. Again, I told Red Wayback Machine is super cool. I opened it up and then I came across this page. But over right now, it seems very normal. But here's the cool part. The moment you scroll down, this happens. The moment I saw it for the first time in my life, I was blown away. And I was like, oh my God, whoa, how did they do it? How can I create something like this? I tried reaching out to every single person I knew, and no one told me how can I build something like this. So let's try to answer that. Okay, let's try to see how we can create animations like these. This is an answer. This is a question I've been looking to answer. I've been trying to search the answer for since the past couple of years. But first of all, let's try to break this down. What is happening in that particular page? So if you try to observe, in order to create this animation, here's the recipe. First of all, you need a MacBook or an image of a MacBook. And then you have this window or basically an image of a window, which is coming in from the top left. Then secondly, this one fades in and zooms out from the bottom right. Then this panel, this control panel, fades in from the top right. And then this one fades in from the bottom left. Now, here's the cool thing which you have to observe, the major thing, which is that this is not one single animation. These are 4 different individual animations, but they're happening at the same time. So what these folks were at Apple, they were doing was that they were putting all of these together to create this immersive illusion or this effect. And they were just playing the sequence of animations at the same time. Of course, we can achieve this with the Web Animations API, what you just saw right now. But things might start looking messier and good as you progress. Because you can imagine, right? Let's say, what if I'm doing something like this, that, hey, when this window one is at 50%, at that point, start animating window three from 0%. So you have to maintain all of this state, and it may even sounds messier in my head. So, so what we can do is, in order to achieve this, we need an orchestra. We need a conductor, not the physics one which can conduct electricity, but a person who leads an orchestra. It can be Tom as well. And this is where JavaScript libraries like GSAP, Green Sock Animation Platform, and Motion One can come into the picture. Now, I have played around with both of these, and I've given my fair share of time to Green Sock. I have not played around with Motion One to that extent. But one thing that both of these libraries have in common is this timeline constructor. This is where things get even interesting. Remember when I told you that the animation constructor was super interesting? Here's why. This timeline constructor can accept a sequence of animations. That is cool. But the animation constructor that we discussed about, it accepts two things. One is effects, which was the keyframe effects which we were passing at that point. And second thing is timeline. Now this timeline, by default, our browsers have this document.timeline. So let's say if I go over here and if I just type, I'll just open the console, document.timeline, timeline. Yeah, it would tell you the amount of time that you have spent on this particular page. It just keeps on increasing. So by default, whenever you're creating any CSS animation, this is the timeline which is used to actually invoke those animations. And 1 second, I'm unable to control my presentation. Okay, that's okay. So, but another thing, right? So if you notice that Apple macOS page, over there, these animations were getting triggered by a scroll. So when we were scrolling up, only at that particular point, animations were actually working. Otherwise, they were in a pause state. To achieve that, GreenSock came up with this particular thing called scroll trigger, which basically what it does is like it just replaces this timeline with a scroll trigger timeline. It synchronizes everything with the scroll bar. And that's how you achieve those animations. Now, sometimes in our products, you may want to go for the plug and play option instead of writing everything from scratch. And GIFs might not be the best choice. Well, this is what I used to do back then, back in school. I always, hey, whenever I need animation, just download a GIF from Giphy or any other website and just put it over there. It looks cool for memes. Of course, it works over there. But for rest of the cases, it might not be the best solution because of, first of all, high file size, the quality, and a lot of other limitations. These are raster based, these are not vector based, these cannot scale up. And that's where Lottie files or something like even Rive has been getting a lot of popularity recently. That can come into the picture. These are pure SVG based animations, which means firstly, they are scalable since they are vector based and they don't take up a lot of size as well. So now we started back with GIFs from 1987 to Flash, SMIL, CSS animations and transitions. And then we looked at the web animations API, just for a quick recap, right? Then we also looked into libraries like GSAP and Motion One. And then we just recently discussed about Lodifiers and Rive as well. Although there is so much more to cover, but it's just take a moment to appreciate how far we have come together, right? We started back with those Coca-Cola GIFs back in those days, and from there to over here. Now, let's try to address what are some of the new things which are cooking up in the web animations world. So one thing which happened back in 2021 was that Chrome developers, they announced this experimental API that they were working with called the Page Transitions API. And as the name suggests, is used for transitioning or navigating between different pages. It's something which Android developers or people with Jetpack Compose, they already have, but it was missing in the web for the last couple of years. It can be enabled behind this hidden flag, Chrome flags document transition in Chrome Canary, I think 104 or later. And once this gets rolled out, adding transitions between different pages would be as easier as just adding this code snippet in your navigate or history.push method if you're using React. By the way, don't get me wrong, you can still achieve these sort of transitions using different tools. One approach that I know is something called Framer Motion. That makes it easier, but still, it is a bit messier to set everything up. And with the page transitions API, it would be super simple. Now, of course, there are a lot more things which are possible with web animations, and we haven't even touched 3JS and WebGL animations. We can think of these as 3D animations. Actually, one of my favorite examples of a 3D website. Well, actually, I've been exploring this tool called Spline as well, which is something you can check out if you're interested in 3D animations. But there's this website I saw. Oh, I think I should share my audio as well for an immersive effect. Yeah, share sound. So looks like a simple, normal website, right? At this point. And even for me, it looked like okay, fancy music, musician, artist, or someone. But the magic happens when you scroll down over here. And you see all of these cassettes over there, these CDs, these albums. The moment you click on one of these, this happens. The moment I saw this, this blew my mind, and this is something you can achieve with WebGL. Usually, like you can use 3GS to achieve this as well, but with that, you need a lot of optimizations, and even with Blender, it'll make much more sense if you do this with WebGL. But yeah, something we can talk about some other day. But yeah, another important thing which we didn't cover today and something which we should account for when we're crafting any web animations, any animation for the web is accessibility. You should ensure that all of your potential users, including people with disabilities, have a decent user experience and are able to easily access your information. But again, since we're short on time, maybe let's take it up on some other day or some other working day instead of a weekend. So that's all that I had. Thanks for tuning in. We have reached the end. I hope you liked the talk. And in case you have any feedback or have any questions, just want to have a fun chat, feel free to connect with me on these handles. That's all from my side. Thank you. Shreya, do you
Yeah,
want to take
so
over?
yeah,
Yeah.
guys, if you have any questions that you would like to maybe ask Ishan, you can start maybe posting it on the chat box, or you can unmute yourselves and ask him. That's okay. Like, yeah, like in the meantime, let me just say that it was a very interesting session so far, Ishan. I mean, everything that you showed, like some of the animations really made me think twice as to what all is possible in today's world and today's times. It was very interesting. Okay, so Shruti is asking, can you share the
Thank you.
link of the website
Yeah, I'll share that.
music? Yeah. Okay. Mamta's question is, how should one start learning about animation? Like after you learn responsive websites.
Okay,
How should
I think the best way to learn these things is by building it, to be honest. I remember I used to participate in these code pin challenges every month. And every month they have these challenges where you have to build one particular element or just focus on one element, one animation. And but most of the times, what helped me a lot is while I was learning it, is that I learned animations just by observing it. So whenever I visited a site which had a very cool, fancy animation, I was always intrigued. For example, the Apple Mac OS page which I showed you, right? The moment I saw it, I just wanted to know how it worked, how I can recreate it, and that's something you can do. It's just something you can learn by experience. I don't have any particular resources in journal. Web.dev is the only resource, or MDN is the only resource that I followed, and yeah, that's one way to go about it.
all
Any
right?
other
Yep.
feedback? Any questions?
Oh, yep. Hope that answers your question, Mamta. And anyone else has any other question? Like, okay.
Start with 3JS to basically get the dimension understanding, but lost in between. Yeah, I know 3JS can get a bit daunting, to be honest. Like even I started exploring 3JS a few years ago. And then when the math stuff came up, sine, cosines, and everything, I was like, okay, this is going beyond, this is going. But what one cool thing that you can do is there's this course, 3GS Journey by Bruno Simon. If you don't know what Bruno Simon is, he's an amazing guy who builds very cool portfolio. He recently launched his course last year, I guess. Even I took that one up, and that's something you can do. It's a very a cool course, and he explains everything in a very good way. Even if you're someone who doesn't know Blender.
All right. Yep. There's another question. So in the meantime, until Ishan answers the question, guys, Lakhan has also been circulating a feedback form. If you guys can spare 10 seconds and fill that form, it would be great. And yeah, we'll take the next one which is what were the two JS libraries for timeline?
Yeah, for that one, I use GSAP, Green Sock Animation Platform. They have this particular plugin, as I mentioned, Scroll Trigger, which one you can look into. Another one is Motion One. But there are a lot more libraries. These are the few famous ones that I have looked at so far. Next one, let's see. Can you tell the names of two SVG-based animations which you mentioned? Yeah, again, as I mentioned, the ones that one was Notifies and the other one was Rhyme. Actually, I'll share it in the chat as well. Notifies and Rhyme. Take a look. What else? Can you share the presentation? Yeah, I'll share the presentation with the organizers. I think they can share with you with the recording and everything else.
Great. Yeah, we'll put it up on the events gallery for you guys to refer once we have it. All right, guys. Yeah,
Cool. Someone
so
is asking about the course. I'll share the link with you. And can we create all animation by CSS only, or we have to use CSS library only? I would say it depends upon what sort of animation you're trying to create. My approach of what I take is if I can create it using CSS only, that is what I would prefer, because why would you unnecessarily add more bundles and more chunk size to your website? But again, it depends upon the use case. If you want to do some 3D stuff, instead of doing it from scratch in WebGL, it makes much more sense to go for something like 3JS or even using a tool called Spline, which I came across recently. I've shared the course link in the chat for those who are asking.
yeah, Harjinder, your question I suppose is then answered because Ishan has shared the course link. Yeah, guys, in the meantime, can we also show some appreciation for Ishan on the chat? Or you can tell us how you found the presentation and keep the questions coming if you have any more, right? Yeah. Yes, Mamta says great presentation. It really was,
Thanks.
yes.
No. Oh, okay, man. Not just and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for being an engaging audience. Like normally, whenever I do these talks online, people don't really engage to that extent, and that is something which is very different. And I observed this last week as well. I think Akansha was here giving a talk, and even her session, she was telling me that the audience was so engaging and it was interesting. Man, one thing, do not call me sir, please. I am a college student. Like when someone calls me sir, like when I was looking at the dial-up connection, I already felt old, and now you're calling sir and everything. Can we do some cube type stuff? Of course, like for that you can look into 3JS. That would be the easiest thing to get started with. And cube is pretty simple over there. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Yep. So I suppose then if we don't have any other question, we can wrap it up then. Guys, thank you for being a great audience. And Ishan, thank you for doing this on a weekend. And thank you for actually, you can see from the comment itself how people have enjoyed and how much they have liked the presentation and your, the whole event. So that was great. It was very engaging for sure. And yep. Anyone else has anything to add or